Hello, this is Aaron Maller from Parallax, and this is just a quick video to go over an interesting inconsistency that came up in a Twitter conversation. Kate Town actually started the conversation saying she was seeing this behavior, and then I tried it in a sample file and wasn't seeing it, and then John Pearson tried it and he was seeing it, so we started doing some experimenting to see what the differences were. Essentially what you're looking at here is 15 floor objects. The ones on the left are all created in existing conditions. The ones in the middle are created in existing conditions and demolished, and the ones on the right are new. So briefly, just to recap, if we were to go in to the Lineweights dialog, we're at 1/8 inch right now. So of course, as a recap, all object surface patterns aside from ceilings always use line weight 1. So you'll see here, if I were to bump up the line weight on line weight 1, we would see all the patterns themselves get darker. Now we'll put it back. And then also, if we were to go into visibility and graphics of this view and we were to go down to floors, we could also do it in object styles just so that we can see the number. But if we were to go to floors and we were to take the projection line weight and change it, of course that doesn't affect the hatch pattern at all. So the hatch pattern is always dependent basically on line weight 1. And that's what we're going to look at. So as you go down these 5 rows, the different floors that we've made is floor type 1, where there is a material, and the material uses a foreground surface pattern. The second one, material 2, uses a background surface pattern. Floor type 3 uses both a foreground and a background, and I've made them go in different directions. That's why you're looking at a crosshatch basically. And number 4 uses a foreground and background, where the foreground is a model pattern and the background is a drafting pattern, because that's all background patterns can be. And number 5, of course, does not have any pattern. So what Kate came across that John then validated and we started doing some testing is, if for some reason somebody has put a pattern in the override for a demolished object. Now where this gets interesting is, if you watch, I'm going to override just the foreground pattern, and I'm going to make it use a orthogonal crosshatch so that it's a pattern that I haven't used really anywhere else besides down here. And of course the one down here is a model pattern, so that's a different story. What you'll notice is that if we do this, not only has the pattern changed, but the line weight on it has changed as well. So if you remember from the beginning of the video, what you're looking at here is this row of floors has a foreground pattern, and this one has a background pattern, and this one has a foreground and a background pattern, as does this one. So the reason that's important is what's happening is, in a situation where you have a background by default and then you override a foreground, it's also overriding the line weights, and it's overriding them into the object style of the projection. So even though this doesn't happen this way anywhere else, now the line weight of the hatch pattern on this object is being driven by the object style projection of the floors, which is super weird. Now if we go back in here, you'll notice this was because we used a foreground pattern. So floors that have foregrounds behave correctly, ones that have both behave correctly. Floors that were background pattern only, as well as floors that had no patterns on them, suddenly get the altered or enhanced line weight, depending on how you want to look at it. Now if we switch this situation and we do the background hatch as the override instead, you'll see that yet again it behaves even more differently. So now we're getting the pattern override on the foreground, we're getting the pattern override on the background and on the situations that use both, but floors that have no pattern at all are still getting a much more enhanced line weight than they're supposed to get. And there is still one additional different behavior, which is if somebody uses the demolition material override. And so in this case, we'll put it on vertical as a foreground pattern. And you'll see here, now we have the patterns are cleared out. And in this case, it's actually interesting because there is now a material with a pattern that's being used as the demolition override, and none of them actually work. If we then go in and switch this material to be a background pattern, you'll see that again, none of them work. Now, I've always just assumed there was something else going on here, and that's why that doesn't work. But it is interesting. You can still, of course, do this, where you then put the crosshatch back on, and then those things are back to working. But it is bizarre that with the introduction of foreground and background patterns, something seems to be enabling some situations to also alter their line weights, which we don't normally have the capability to do. So it's presenting some interesting curiosities in how drawings look. So thought you guys wanted to see if that was on your radar.